to all of you joining. Go ahead, do me a favor, turn your video on, at least say hi to me and our guest. You can turn it off later if you want to. We're not going to pick on anybody. We've got folks from all over the world today, so I'm very excited. And I'm not going to take up a lot of time because our guest, one of my favorite people, is going to be sharing a whole lot with us. Here's the way we're going to handle this logistically. I'm going to do a quick intro. I'm going to let our guest professor do his thing, which he is so good at, and then we will invite questions at the end. If something pops in your head, use the chat room, write down your question. I will monitor that for our guest, and he will then answer questions at the end. And obviously we'll all be available after that. CJ, thank you for reminding me again. I just enabled the live transcript. So for any of you who are looking at that, that's what the transcription is down at the bottom. Please remember that that is live and automated. Nobody's typing this in. So both of us apologize in advance for any typos that might show up, but at least it'll allow you, if you need to turn the sound off, you can actually follow along with the transcript as well. All right, do me a favor, everybody kind of mute yourselves right now, with the exception of our guest. I'm going to jump right in because I'm so excited about what we're talking about today and introduce our guest professor. James Scott is a world-renowned professional hypnotist, mind reader, psychic, and influence trainer. For more than 25 years, he has been entertaining audiences all over the world. From corporate boardrooms and hotel ballrooms to private parties and school events, James brings both charm and expertise to bear to captivate, educate, and motivate groups all over the world. James uses his talents and skill to help countless people overcome their fears, bad habits, and negative behaviors in order for them to take back their lives. And if that's not enough, he's a board certified hypnotherapist and NLP trainer. So James, I'm going to let you at this point, kind of before we jump in, tell everybody how they can contact you, your website, your email address.
Sure. My website, the easiest way to reach me is at themanwhocanreadminds.com. That is themanwhocanreadminds.com. And it's simply, my email address is simply james@themanwhocanreadminds.com.
All right. So I'm going to add one little annotation here, and James didn't know I was doing this. I've known James for quite a while, and he and I have a lot of private conversations, and we exchange information back and forth. Fascinating man, full of information for you. The focus of today, by the way, is how he strategically, tactically, and logistically actually handles the number of readings that he does. You've heard me talk before about gallery readings. For those of you that don't know, a gallery reading is much like what you're seeing right now. It's a room full of faces, either live or online, and the psychic, the reader, the fortune teller is actually choosing who gets read at a particular time, and they're not necessarily in order. So that's at least how I handle them. James takes it to a whole nother level. And when he was writing me in the midst of his Ren Fair activities, and we were kind of working out some tactics and logistics, and then he started telling me how many readings he was doing a day. It blew my freaking mind, because I've never done that many in a day, even in a gallery reading. And so I, at that point, asked him if he would come on and share his expertise, because he is a master now in handling large groups of people in an efficient and effective way. So without further ado, James, it's all yours.
Okay, well, thank you, Scott. First, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to do this. Second, I want to say that I am humbled and honored that one person, let alone all of you, would want to hear anything that I have to say. So, and I want to say that if you came here today thinking that I was going to give you all my secrets, I got news for you. I am. Okay, now I've got a lot of stuff to give, but we only have a short period of time, so I'm going to jump right into it. And my goal today is, there's a lot of things and a lot of for me to talk about, and there's a lot of things that are common sense. But if pardon me, but if you know some of these things, that's great. If you know all of these things, that's wonderful too. My goal is and hope is that you just get at least one good thing out of this that you can use yourself, and that would make me happy if you just get one thing. So let's talk about speed readings. What is a speed reading? Well, and today, as Scott mentioned, I'm going to talk about speed readings and gallery or group readings. So what is a speed reading? Well, to my knowledge, there is no set definition, but my definition is simply any reading that is 15 minutes or less, I consider a speed reading. Now, when someone comes to me for a private reading, contacts me and they want a one-on-one private reading, typically those readings are 30 minutes to an hour. And we'll talk a little bit at the end about that because I want to differentiate some things and talk about pricing and things like that, because I'm one of those people who's not afraid to talk about pricing. And people always want to know when they're starting in readings, how much do you charge? I'm happy to tell you what I charge and what I used to charge and what I charge now. But typically when people come to me for a private reading, it's 30 minutes or 60 minutes. And I try to shun away from 30-minute readings because frankly, I like to make the money that I get off of an hour reading, but also I like to have the time to give a lot of information if I can. So where are you going to do a speed reading? Well, there's a lot of places that you can do them. Now, my favorite happens to be the Renaissance Festival. Why am I dressed like this? Because this is how I dress at the Renaissance Festival. Okay, we have to wear, somewhat period garb. I'm inside of a booth, and we could talk a little bit about that as well. But the Renaissance Festival is one. Psychic fairs are another. And then conferences, conventions, and private parties. And again, I will get into a little bit of the differences a little bit later with those. So why would somebody want to come and get a speed reading as opposed to like a private reading? Well, the bottom line is most people have never had a reading before. So, when I'm at the Renaissance Festival, for example, people will come and they'll sit down, and one of the first thing I ask them is, so have you ever had a reading before? And the overwhelming majority of people will say no. I would say probably 80 to 90% of the people say no. And so it's a non-committal way for them to do that, right? Because they're not calling me up saying, hey, can I invest a small fortune in a private reading with you? Because they don't know me, right? But this gives them the opportunity to come in. It's 15 minutes. They can dip their toe in the water, as it were, and not feel like they've committed to this whole metaphysical thing, right? Plus, it's in a setting like the Renaissance Festival, we have a bunch of different readers working all at the same time, so they can get a reading from me, and they can pop out and get a reading from someone else, and pop out and get a reading from someone else. And we try not to cross over our modalities. So we've got, everybody's doing one specific thing. I'm fortunate in that I use the deck of shadows for the most part. So I'm the only person that I know of in this entire area that uses the deck of shadows. Yay, thank you, Scott. But it's my oracle choice, and people are like, wow, what is this? So, but it is a great thing for people to be able to get a quick reading. Now, not at the Renaissance Festival, if I'm like at a conference or something, which I do a lot of corporate events, people will come up and want to. People will come up and want to. Same thing. They'll have there's a short reading, and it's interesting because I do get hired, or at least approached, for a lot of corporate events. And the interesting thing about that is that you would think, and Scott and I were talking about this before we started, that you would think that perhaps, you know, people in certain areas, certain levels of management or something may not, you know, may shy away from this. And quite the opposite is true. When I'm working conferences and I'm working conventions, I'm hounded by people. You know, I could be completely done and trying to leave, and there's a line, and there's people following me out the door, literally asking me, can you know, shoving their palm in my face or something, trying to get me to give them a reading, which is a wonderful thing if you want to be on a power trip, but it's not if you're starving and want to go home, right? So it's as we myself giggle snort, but it's really funny because it's a very popular thing. Now, I was very fortunate when I found out I was doing this, that I reached out to some people that are actually here today and said, well, what would you want to know in the 45 minutes that I have? And one of my dear friends said, well, here's a bunch of questions. And so I was able to go, great, awesome, and write some notes down. I keep looking over here at the other monitor because that's where my notes are. And one of the first things that they asked were, if I was 10 years old and wanted to learn how to do this, what are the essentials that you would teach me? So let's talk about that. What are some of the essentials of a speed reading? Well, the first thing that is really important is timing. Timing is everything, okay? Because again, you're talking 15 minutes or less. Now at the Renaissance Festival, for example, all of our readings are 15 minutes. Every single reading is 15 minutes, and we are booked back to back to back to back to back to back to back. And I'll talk about numbers in a little bit. But you have to get them in, get the reading done, and get them out within 15 minutes. And we have systems that I largely ignore, but we have systems that our schedulers use. They will knock at 10 minutes. When we have 10 minutes left, they will knock twice when we have 5 minutes left. I'm sorry, they will knock when we have 10 minutes left. They will they have a peacock feather that they wave over the top of our. It's just a lot of subtle things. And then when it's 15 minutes, they ring a bell, right? So we know, right? But here's the thing. I set my timer for 2 minutes less, whether I'm at the Renaissance Festival or I'm at a conference or whatever. I set my timer for 2 minutes less than the length of the readings. Okay, because so if it's a 15-minute reading, I set my timer for 13 minutes. Why do I do that? Because it gives me 1 minute to get them in and 1 minute to get them out, right? And I made the mistake when I first started the Renaissance Festival. I made the mistake of, well, I'm sorry, I didn't make it when I was giving my audition reading. I made the mistake of going into all the nuances and the frame settings and everything that I do when I give a full length reading. And the woman was like, this is great, but you ain't got time for all that bullshit. And pardon my language, but that's exactly what she said to me. She's like, we got to get them in and get them out, right? And when you look at it from a business standpoint, she's right, because you want to make that cut. You want to spend all that time on that sitter, giving them all the information that you can give them. You don't need to set a frame. They're there to get a reading. You don't have time for all of that, you know. So, because I was doing, you know, the whole grounding thing with them and energy and explaining of it, which is again great for a one-on-one private reading that isn't an hour long, not so much in a speed reading. So again, this is not a time for idle chat. It's not time for much of a pre-talk. I simply, once they sit down, I introduce myself and I ask them their name. And then I ask them if they've ever had a reading before. And if so, what kind? Because I want to know, you know, and then now again, I'm using the deck of shadows most of the time. And if I usually at the Renaissance Festival, at least this year, and this is the first year I worked there, and I can get into that if anybody has questions about that, how I did that. But I did deck of shadows and palmistry, and I was doing deck of shadows probably 95% of the time because it got real popular very quickly. But I explain with the deck of shadows, I would explain to them very quickly, you know, as we go through this, this is similar to tarot. And even if you've not had a reading with tarot before, you may know that there are cards like death and things like that, that at first blush, you might go, what does that mean? But understand that these are symbolic in nature, and it does not necessarily mean if you see a card that says death, and I will mention the cards that are in the deck of shadows, such as, you know, death is death and revenge and betrayal, things like that. Don't look at those and you know, and go, what does this mean? Because we have to look at it big picture. And then they say, okay. And then something that I mentioned to them, and I think I got this, actually, I think I got this from Scott. I'm paraphrasing it, but I think I got this from Scott. I got a lot of stuff from Scott. Thank you. But I tell them, listen, I can either tell you what you want to know, or I can tell you the truth. Which would you prefer? And everybody says, tell me the truth. Right? Everybody says. I'm sure I'm going to have somebody sometimes says, don't tell me anything, just what I want to hear. But it's not happened yet in all the years I've been doing readings. But and then I get right into the reading, and you have to, because you have to have a structure for these readings. So what are my structure? What is my structure? Well, and I'm not going to get so much into content. We're talking about the business and the structure of it. So for a 15-minute reading, I cram a lot into a 15-minute reading. I typically do a 9-card spread. Okay, a 9-card spread. Now, if I'm doing palmistry, I will typically just read one palm, right, in 15 minutes, but maybe both. But typically just one. But I give them a full. If you know anything about palmistry, I'm going into the elemental hand shapes. I'm going into the finger links. I'm going into mounts. I'm going into the lines. I'm giving them a full reading in about 15 minutes. But I'm bang, 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 right? And I may not even get to the lines, because especially if I'm talking about mounts and things like that, it depends on what I'm doing. But in a 15-minute reading, I'm typically doing a 9-card spread. But again, I'm zipping through it. Okay. And I'm doing it's a past, present, future. So 3 for past, 3 for present, 3 for future, right? For a 10-minute, if I'm doing a corporate event or I'm doing a private party and I'm doing 10 minutes or less, then I will typically do a 3-card past, present, future, 1 card for each, right? For a 5-minute reading or less, which yes, I do those. Okay, not at the Renaissance Festival, but if I'm at a convention, and this happens a lot, where they say, well, we've got 300 people and we want to make sure everybody gets a reading, and they hire me for an hour, and I'm like, that's okay. First off, I can't do 300 people in an hour. Okay, the most I've ever done in an hour was 100. Okay, and that's just bam, 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 right? But yeah, it's crazy trying to do 100 people, and that's groups, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But if for 5-minute readings, I'll do either a 1 or 2 card spread, and I tend to use these days, I tend to do something similar. Now, we're not talking gallery readings, we're talking just one-on-one readings with 1 card. I will do something similar to Scott's listening card, because it's very powerful, or I'll do something similar to if I'm using 2 cards, the what's real and the what's not spread. Okay, but you can get a lot of information out of 1 card or 1 oracle, whatever you're doing. And this is where I think it's important for me to talk about knowing your oracle. You really have to know your oracle inside and out. This is why I don't use tarot. The Renaissance Festival has already hired me for next year. They hired me literally the day after our Renaissance Festivals ended, which was 2 weeks ago. They hired me that day. They called me and said, we want you back next year. And they want me to learn tarot, right? Well, I'm learning tarot, but I'm not comfortable enough to do readings with it yet. And I mention this to you because you have to know your oracle inside and out. Now, no, I'm lucky that I'm using an oracle that not very, people don't know about. I'm using the deck of shadows. If you're using something like tarot or numerology or something, there are people that will show up that know or think they know inside and out, right? So it's important that you know your oracle, but also the main reason that it's important, I think, to know your oracle is just so that you can you can give a lot of information off of one card. If you're using one card, you're giving a lot of information in a short period of time. Now, the biggest challenge for me, truthfully, at the beginning of this was time, because I had to stay on time, and people will come in late for their readings, because the way it works, the Renaissance Festival is, just for a note about business, is we have hawkers we have that are out standing out front on a promenade, and they're on a, not a promenade, mezzanine, and they're shouting down to the crowd, and they're making, the jokes are hilarious, but they're making jokes, and they're attracting people, and like one of the great lines is, I spent some time hanging out with the hawkers because I thought they were amazing, and we have a really good one. And he'll say something like, if he's got little kids, he'll say something like, it looks like someone there is invested in your future. Perhaps you should find out what it is. And then they come in and give a reading. It's great lines and things like that, right? But I'm out there with these people, and so we have the hawkers, and then we have a scheduler. So people will come up and they will talk to, and they'll say, well, I want a reading, and they'll ask them what kind of reading, and they'll tell them what they offer. And then the scheduler will schedule it. And then usually we're booked solid, so they have to come back, right? So they'll just give them one of my business cards, or whatever reader they'll give them their business card with a time on the back of it. And if they lose the card, well, but they come back, and people always show up late. And so it's a couple of minutes late. So I know that I have my trusty dusty smartphone with me. And what I do is, if a person shows up and they're late, I look at the time, and I know that at 15 minutes increments, I have to, quarter after, half hour, quarter till in the hour, I have to be ready for the next person. So if they show up 5 minutes late, I'm setting that timer for 10 minutes, right? Or 8 minutes, right? And I'm not letting them see the timer. It's just going to vibrate on my table when we're done, right? So the reason I do that is because, again, you have to stay on time. Timing is everything, right? As an entertainer, I know this, right? But as a reader, it's very important, because you got to stay on time, stay on schedule. So that is everything. Now the if you have a hawker, if you have a scheduler, they will keep you on track. But it took me about a day to get kind of on track, or about half a day, because I was like, oh my gosh, and I'm trying to get into my flow, and you'll pick up your flow pretty quickly. Now, if you're working if you're doing speed readings, and let's back up for a moment. Scott was talking about the number of readings that I did over time, right? So I'll put it to you this way. Our Renaissance Festival, for example, is 9 weekends long. Okay. And I didn't work them all, because I was like a backup reader, right? They would call me if somebody was sick or out. This was my first year getting my foot in the door. And they hired me for Labor Day weekend. And they said, listen, we have somebody who's going to be out all weekend. Can you fill in? Sure. It was a Saturday, a Sunday, and the only Monday that our Renaissance Festival was open. Now, understand, we have I think the largest or the second largest Renaissance Festival in the United States here in Maryland. I'm in Maryland, in the United States. Yeah. Over 3 days, Saturday and Sunday and Monday of Labor Day weekend, I did 86 back-to-back 15-minute readings. 86. Let that sink in for a minute. Most people don't do 86 readings in a year. Okay. I did them in 3 days. Okay. It was insane. I was exhausted. I think every day I was taking maybe 1 2-minute bathroom break. And fortunately, they have porta potties that are like 2 doors down from us, that are just for the people that work there. And I would literally say to the scheduler, I gotta go to the bathroom. I would run out, use the bathroom, and run right back. And that was it. And I had bottles of water and with me, and that was it.
I'm going to interrupt you here real quick, James, just to let everybody know. In the midst of all this, James was connecting with me and kind of letting me know what was going on. This is a man with unending energy, unbelievable excitement. He was gone. He was fried at the end of every day. And it was really just, James, take a breath. So I just wanted to pass that on. This is crazy when you do that many readings, that you have to stay centered yourself.
You do. And it was very hard because, thank you, Scott, because 2 days, for the 2 days after that, Tuesday and Wednesday, I literally slept for 2 days. My wife was like, "Are you okay?" But it was insane. But you know, that's the amount of readings we would do, because we would start at 10 in the morning. We would end at 7. So we're there from 10 in the morning till 7 at night, 9-hour days, right? So you could end up doing 36 readings a day. Now, typically the gates didn't open till 10. So people would typically filter in about 10:30, 10:45, and that's when we would have our first reading. And we would typically have our last reading about 6-ish. So you're doing all these different readings, you know, all day long.
James, actually, Hava asked an interesting question that I'm not going to save till the end, and that is, don't they schedule time for breaks? Can you do that? Is it literally just back to back because it's money in the door?
It's money in the door, and they don't. Thank you for that question, Hava. No, they don't schedule breaks, and because we have 5 readers at a time. We have 5. I'm in a building that has 5 booths in it. It's an actual physical building, right? So we're in 5 separate rooms, and it's covered. It's got a roof and everything. So even if it's raining outside, which, by the way, when it's inclement weather, people come and get readings because they're inside out of the rain, right? And we're so slammed this year. This for the first time in the history of our Renaissance Festival, and I think it's been going on for 30 years or something. For the first time last year, they canceled it. They didn't have it because of COVID, and this year when they opened it, they literally had to go to online sales only because they sold out. They sold out every day, sold out, and we're talking like they weren't at limited capacity. They just were a gazillion people. So no, they don't program in breaks because we're just chock full. If you have to go to the bathroom, you just have to tell the scheduler, "Look, man, I got to go to the bathroom," and you just got to run out and do it and come right back. Yeah, because if you schedule a break, you're not gonna get a reading. You know, you're going to lose at least 1 reading, and that's, you know. Now let's talk about money, and then we'll at the Renaissance Festival, and then we'll come back to actually we'll talk about pricing at the end, I promise. Okay, so that's gallery, that's the speed readings portion of it. And it's really I'm going to stop for a moment and ask if there's any questions in terms of the speed reading, because I'm going to get into gallery and group readings in a moment.
There actually is a question from Eva, and Eva wants to know, do people choose a reader, or does the scheduler assign them?
So people choose a reader based upon, and thank you, that's an excellent question. People choose a reader based upon either they know what type of reading they want, which most people don't. But if they do, then he'll say, well, you know, this person does this. So we typically have someone who reads runes, someone who does dream interpretation, someone who does tarot, someone who does palms, and then they have me who does deck of shadows. Okay, I also do palmistry, but it depends on, you know, and we have some overlap, but it depends on what people want, right? You would think we would have 5 different tarot readers, and we don't have that. We have 1 or maybe 2 tarot readers, and then because they try to allow for a variety, you know. And it's interesting because people will come and you see interesting trends, because you'll get some people who are scared because of their upbringing or whatever, their belief system. They don't want to touch, they don't want anything to do with tarot, but they'll let you read their palm, or they're really into runes or whatever, you know. And so they try to make sure that there's enough business for everybody, but almost everybody does, almost everybody does multiple systems. So if somebody comes up and says, well, I want a palm reading, but the two people that normally do palms are busy, well, they can, and that this person doesn't have somebody, they can send them into them, so, but they typically pick what type of reading they want.
Yeah, I want to underscore one thing, and some of you have heard me say this before. It's not atypical for me to do a couples reading, and the people will come in and the wife wants her cards read. I actually remember a very interesting situation, and it's very similar, James, I think, to what you're talking about, where wife got her reading, and then the husband said, I don't want anything to do with that. I don't believe in that, but can you read my palm? And it's like, so, while I use the deck of shadows, obviously, in the Vitruvian Square, I'm certainly well versed in a number of other methods, including palmistry, and there's some really good things out there. I want to add one quick note to this. James, I think you do mentoring as well, don't you?
Correct, yes.
So, you guys can always, if you want more personal, professional coaching in this, you can contact James as well. Because like I said, I thought I could do speed readings and gallery readings. This man blows it out of the water. So go ahead, James. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Scott. And yes, I will. I believe in shameless self-promotion. So, look, I do private consultation for people that are putting their acts together, that are doing, I do a lot of things. So please, if you have any questions, please, reach out to me and we can talk about that. The other thing is with gallery readings, and don't worry, I will get to pricing, I promise you. If I don't talk about anything else, I will get to pricing, I promise. Okay. But let's talk about gallery readings for a moment, and group readings. So a gallery reading, as Scott said, is simply if you have a ton of people, hello microphone, if you have a ton of people and you're doing one-on-one readings, but they're very short, they're just direct, but they're public readings, meaning that I'm giving that reading in front of a gallery of people. Okay. Those typically tend to be very short readings. Now I did they can go long, but typically they tend to be very short. I did a seance, a private seance on the 30th up in Delaware, and as part of that, I was doing what Scott and I know as Q&A, is basically was doing readings. I was answering questions. People wrote down questions and I was answering them, right? And just opening them up, looking at them, reading them out, and saying, okay, let's do this. And those tended to be a little bit longer than just a couple of minutes. But typically when I'm doing gallery readings, they tend to be 5 minutes or less. Those readings tend to be 5 minutes or less. And I typically do a 1-card reading. If it's a smaller group of people, I'll do 3-card spreads typically. But again, it depends on the oracle I'm using, because a lot of times I will do if I'm doing gallery readings, it's just intuition. I'm doing intuitive readings. And again, not to impose my belief system on anyone else's here, but I also do mediumship readings, right? So a lot of those readings that I'm doing in gallery readings are mediumship readings. But I have my own take on mediumship, and that's it's another discussion. But the point is that I am not using an actual, I keep looking down here because I got my deck.
Sounds like another sampler class to me, but okay.
Perhaps, but I keep looking down because I've got my deck of shadows here. But I'm not, if I'm doing a gallery reading, let's say that we're sitting here and I'm literally just drawing a card for someone and giving a reading off of that, or maybe I'm and a lot of times in gallery, this is important to note. A gallery reading, again, I'm looking at my notes because I don't want to go off note. A gallery reading is usually done, for me, if I'm using cards, is done with one card or one element of an oracle. If I've got Crystals, I will just get a feeling for what crystal is right for that person, and I'm just going to switch just for a moment, Scott, to this overhead camera. Oop, maybe, and you guys can see that I have my Vitruvian Square here with my keyboard. But the point is that I would normally, just throw something here and people would be able to see me. And over here in this corner here, I would have my, my face with my camera, but I'm not doing that here. So
James, I'm going to stop you here real quick because Enrico actually asked, do you use the Vitruvian Square in your readings, or is it just the deck of shadows?
Yes. I do use the Vitruvian. Thank you. That's a good question. I do use the Vitruvian Square, and people ask me, what is that cool thing? And then I tell them that it's, I don't tell them what it's called because I'm trying to keep that to myself. But I say this is something that, I do tell them the Vitruvian Square, and I tell them it was created by a friend of mine, and as is the deck. And I say a mentor and a friend of mine, and they're like, oh, it's so cool. But yes, I do use the Vitruvian Square because even in a 15-minute reading, there are elements of the Vitruvian Square that just, I have to say, I have to take, a brief commercial message for Scott. If you don't know the Vitruvian Square, what the hell is wrong with you? Okay, I don't know what you're doing with your life. Okay, because it has revolutionized the way that I do readings. And I was told about the Vitruvian Square by a couple of people. Most notably Jerome Finley, who said, James, you must learn the Vitruvian Square. And I'm like, yeah. And as Scott said, we've talked for a couple of years, and I was bugging Scott constantly. I need a copy of the Vitruvian Square before it was reprinted. So it is a wonderful thing. So if you don't know it, learn it and use it. But yes, I use it with every reading, at least elements of it with every reading. So even if I'm doing, and this is something that, but again, Jerome mentioned to me, because the casting cloths weren't around for a while. I don't always, if I'm doing another oracle or if I'm doing something without an oracle, I'm still using the Vitruvian Square, because Jerome talked to me about, and then Scott too, about holographically in my mind projecting it on in the air or whatever. And this is seeing the matrix, right? And this is an important thing, I think, because when you get to know your oracle very well, and I consider the Vitruvian Square its own form of oracle, when you get to know it really well, you can project that into your mind out and see the matrix, and use that when you're doing gallery readings. But again, a gallery reading, like now, I'm seeing, I've got Scott here on my screen, but I'm seeing a strip of people above me. And I say to someone, like, if I call on Stan, for example, and I'd say, Stan, are you, is there something that you would want? And then I would just draw a card, or I would, have a bunch of oracles. Usually, if I'm doing a psychic party, home party, or if I'm doing gallery readings on Zoom, I do a lot of things on Zoom these days. I'll have a number of oracles sitting around, and I'll just say, this feels right to me. And I have, again, thank you, Scott. I have a ton of things. I have, dice. I have story cubes. I have crystals. I have oracle decks. And I wanted to mention, there was one oracle deck that I have. Where did I put it? Here it is. That I want to mention to you guys that I really love, and I'll tell you why I love it. It is called the Sacred Traveler deck. Okay, and you can just get these on Amazon. But I love it because they're beautiful cards. And the thing I love about it is you don't have to learn the meaning of the card, really, because it just has an image and it has a statement at the bottom of it, right? Like it'll say, like, wonderful journeys ahead, or something like that. And these are great for gallery, like this one, for example. I'll just show you guys. It says traveling lightly, right? And then it says simplify your life. All right, and just off of that simple card and that one statement, I can give a 5-minute reading easily.
Yeah, right? I'm gonna interrupt one thing here real quick and just tell you guys, I didn't know James was going here, but Denise Lynn, in addition to these cards, has one of the most amazing books that you all need to get, called Quest. And it is how to go on your own personal vision quest. And I actually use this book now to help generate some of the spreads that I use. She's a wonderful thinker. So I'm sorry, James, to interrupt. By the way, we got about 10 minutes left.
Okay, perfect. I'll get into pricing in just a moment. And I tell you, I did not know that. Thank you, Scott, because I will pick up that book. The reason I know about this deck is because someone did a reading for me using that deck, right? And I, you know, the things that I use, the oracles that I'm drawn to, have all come as a result of readings that I got in the past. So, you know, these are, you know, use things that resonate with you. I don't care, as Scott said, you can read light bulbs, you know. I don't care, read whatever works for you. But if I'm doing gallery readings, as I said, I'm typically using one card or one element and moving on to the next person. The one thing someone asked me was, well, how do you avoid repeating things over and over and over if you're doing a gallery? Well, I'm not using the same cards, right? Usually what I do is if I've got a deck and I'm doing, you know, I can avoid that simply by discarding whatever card I'm using and pulling the next card. Now, as Scott mentioned, I don't typically read people in order. I don't go down the line and read people in order. I may, but I certainly use the cards in order. You know, I'll shuffle them, I'll pull a card, you know, and then I go and I'll throw, you know, I'll just toss it down, and I may use the next card or I may shuffle it. And why do I mention this? Because that's, again, by discarding part of, if I'm using a deck of cards, which is the easiest thing to do in a gallery reading, then I don't have to worry about that, because I'm just discarding the card, and the same card won't come up twice, right? Let's talk about that for group readings. Let's move into that for a moment. Group readings. When I go to I get hired a lot to do corporate walk around, you know, at a convention or a cocktail party or something like that. And if people want readings, a lot of times they try to stick me in the corner and just have people come to me. I don't let them do that. I tell them that's not how I work. Okay. Now, if I'm forced to do that, or if they're paying me a substantial amount more than I want or that I asked for, then yeah, okay, great, awesome. But I prefer to just walk around. And one of the things, I have not started doing this, but I will start doing this, and I mentioned it to you here, is Scott has mentioned to us the pocket universal tarot, right? And so I will start buying these, and then I will just walk around and give every single person a card, right? And they can keep the card if they want, you know, but the point is that I will just give everybody a single card and give them a reading. Now, I don't have to let them keep the card, but the point is that these are small enough that I can carry them around, and I can pass out a whole, I can say, here, you take one, you take one, you take one, you take one, and I'm surrounded by 12 people. And I go, what card have you got? And they hold it up, and I go, that means this, boom, 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 boom. And I go to the next person, and I go, boom, 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 because this is what I do. I also learn, I do palmistry in groups. I have everybody, you know, why do I do palmistry, by the way? Because I don't have to carry anything, and almost everybody has at least one hand, right? And so I can have a group of 12 people. That's how I do 100 people in an hour. I have a group of 12 people stand around me, hold up their hand. And I say, okay, if you've got this shaped hand, look, and they start comparing to each other, right? Sheila Lyon, right? Sheila Lyon, baby. But Sheila Lyon is a woman who has a great book called Palms Up. If you can find it, it talks about the system. So let's talk money. And I know I'm going at breakneck speed, but I want to get you down to pricing because that's important. So pricing, okay. Actually, I'll hit one last thing before I get to pricing, because I'm gonna, you know, I think this is important. Someone asked me to touch on what if you don't get any hits? What if you're doing a reading and you're just not getting anything? Nothing is coming out the way you want it or the way the sitter wants it. I think it's important for me to address this, okay, because very few people address this. Scott has before, but a lot of people just don't address that, you know. So there's two aspects of that, right? One is if you have a sitter who is denying everything that you say, right? They're just like, no, 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 no. Well, anybody could have said that, right? At the Renaissance Festival, I had one person do this. One. It's very rare. I mention it because it's going to happen eventually. And this woman really hexed my vibe, really threw me off. And this is why grounding is important. But I just kind of brushed it off and moved on, right? But if that happens, what I do is I either attempt to strengthen my rapport with the person by saying, look, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what the cards are, or the oracle is telling me, right? And that tends to sometimes reestablish rapport. If not, I can just draw additional cards to get clarity, right? Something I learned from a wonderful man sitting on the other side of the camera. Or I'll just move on to another part of the reading. But if the sitter becomes real bothersome to me, I will have the what the hell are we doing here talk with them, right? And just say, look, you came to me for a reading. Now, I'm a little bit more bravado about that than some people are. I have no problem having the what some people would refer to as the come to Jesus talk with people. I don't have a problem with that because I'm charging a substantial amount of money for what I do, and the people are paying me a substantial amount of money. And at these events, it's not the people sitting down with me that I have to make happy. I have to make the sitter, the booker happy. Period. And that's a business thing, but understand that at the end of the day, that's who you have to satisfy as the person who signs the check. And also keep in mind that those readings and speed readings, they're over in 5 minutes, so it doesn't matter. You have to just move on. Next. But let's say the other side of that coin is, what if I'm not feeling it? What if I'm doing a reading and I'm like, this is never happens for me, but let's just say I'm hungover or whatever, and I'm trying to do these readings and I'm just not, my intuition's not on for whatever reason. Then there are 3 approaches I will use. I will either use another oracle. I'll just have, switch to something else because that might kickstart my intuition. Or I will use numerology based on their name, or like Scott does with random numbers that just pop into my head. I'll use numerology because I know numerology inside and out. And even if my intuition is not working that day or whatever, doesn't want to come out to play, I can use that divination system of numerology and give an amazing reading. I've been doing numerology for 30 years. If you don't know numerology, please learn the basics. And the third thing is using what's called the seer kind or doppelganger technique. And very simply, what that is you look at that person and you ask yourself, who do they remind me of? Right? And give a reading to that person. This is one of the strongest, least talked about things in the entire psychic reading world. And it's a great technique because it works. If you're stuck and you can't get your you don't know what to say to this person, then just imagine, look at them and say, who do they remind me of? And it doesn't have to be somebody that you know personally. It could be an actor, could be somebody you've heard about in history. It's better if it's somebody that you've actually experienced in your life. But maybe it was somebody that you were in grade school with. So the point is that will kickstart your intuition.
Yeah, James, now, we're kind of coming at the end here, so I want to make sure you talk about pricing.
I'm doing that right now.
And then I got a couple other questions I want to make sure that we hit on. So go for it.
Okay. So how much money can you make with this? Let's talk about pricing. So let's talk about the Renaissance Festival first, and because you may have a similar thing in your area where you want to set up business. Now, this is not I'm working for a woman who pays the booth fees and everything, right? She has the building. But all of our readings, there are 15-minute readings, whether it is a individual or a couple, okay? For an individual reading, we charge $25. Of that $25, I get $16. The hawker gets $7, and the building gets $2. Okay, so I'm getting $16 per reading minimum. If it's a couple, it's still a 15-minute reading. It's just I'm reading 2 of them together, right? It's not 15 minutes each. It's 15 minutes for the couple, right? And we charge $35 for that, and I get $21. The hawkers get 11 to split between themselves, and then the building gets $3. So I'm getting a minimum of $21 for couples readings. Let's talk about private gig. Oh, I'm sorry. And the reason I mention that is because that's not bad money, pretty decent money, you know, and over that 3-day weekend of Labor Day, I made over $1,500 plus tips. Okay. Which again is not bad for a 3-day haul, you know. That being said, I make more than that for 1 hour doing my shows, but that's a whole nother story. But it's great to fill in my calendar. So tips. I don't have it. Doggone it. I have a sign that that I make. It's an acrylic sign that lights up. It's got a little base and it says tipping is good karma. Okay. Again, I'm all about shameless self-promotion. Okay. People will tip you. And I have lots of advice on that we can talk about another time. So private gigs, right? When I'm doing this for private gigs, I'm going to tell you right now in the United States, and I know this for a fact, this is from market research and years of doing this. Right now, the average rate for someone giving a reading per hour of strolling is $150 to $175 an hour. I charge substantially more than that. Okay. I charge $250 an hour minimum with a 2-hour minimum. So if they hire me for 20 minutes, they're paying me $500 minimum. Okay. But I can do that because I'm known. And, you know, when I first started, I did not charge that much. I was charging like $75 an hour. Right. But I can tell you right now, if you want to do this and make money from it, you can charge and get hired all day for $125 to $150 an hour. Okay. Private one-on-one, I want to talk about that really quickly because people don't want to talk about that. And I'm going to tell you, you can easily charge. I don't like to do half-hour readings, but I'll do them, right? I charge $85 for a 30-minute reading, and that's either over the phone or over Zoom. Okay, I prefer to do them over Zoom, but some people just want to do it on the phone, and that's cool because then I can just sit in my pajamas, right? If it's an hour reading, it's $150. Okay, so they get a little bit of a discount. I don't like to do longer than an hour, but that's typically $150. And that's, you know, that's the type of, and I'm booked pretty solid. Okay. Again, if I'm doing gigs, if I'm doing corporate gigs, it's at least a minimum of $250 an hour. And people, you know, now you have to understand that I'm doing mostly corporate work, right? But even for private parties, if someone wants me to just come and do readings, it's at least $250 an hour with a 2-hour minimum.
Wonderful. So James, I'm going to interrupt you here because I'm going to bring this to a close. However, I want to end with something very important. And BC asked this as far as he wants to start doing holiday parties, but doesn't want to read for friends. How does he get his name out there? I actually had a question written down for you. If someone wants to start going to Ren Fair, so you mentioned being the temporary reader, the fill-in reader, and then they looked at you and went, we need him next year. If they want to do Ren Fair, psychic fairs, corporate events, or as BC was mentioning, private parties, do you have a specific recommendation? I mean, I've got one that I'll give it after you're done, but how does someone get started with this?
There are, with Renaissance festivals, you have to contact most Renaissance festivals. You have to get in touch with. I would find out who already does readings there, and if they have a booth, and if they hire readers. Okay, and that way you're not paying for the the booth and the electricity and all that stuff, right? You're just going in and working for them. But you need to contact whoever does that. If they don't have anybody, or if they tell you, well, we're not hiring, then you have to look at being a vendor there, and that's literally getting in touch with the organizers. And not almost all Renaissance festivals will have a Facebook group. You just find that Facebook group and post in that Facebook group. That's how I did it, right? Or you can just attend the Renaissance festival and approach them there. But it's better if you do it way beforehand. because then you can get in. That's how I did it. I literally, how I got this gig was I went into the Facebook group and said, I'm trying to get in touch with whoever does the readings. So,
I'm gonna add to this the power of what James is saying. You would be amazed how accessible these folks really are. Why? They don't want the organizers and the hawkers and the promoters, they don't want a reading. They want money. It's a business for them. You're providing that. So BC, here's the big thing. You got to let them know that you're actually there. Right now, most of you, not all of you, because we've got some professional readers here, most of you are the best kept secrets in the world. You're the best kept fortune tellers that we've ever seen, this collection right here. That's your problem. We can fix it very easily. And there are actually a few people on here that I've consulted with as far as starting websites, starting a persona. So BC and anybody else, if you're looking at doing readings, number one, let people know you're doing it. I wouldn't be as hesitant, by the way, about reading for friends, because you're going to continue, as soon as people know that's what you're doing, you're going to have family and friends ask you for readings. So I would get over that. But number two, particularly you, BC, with the connections that you have and the organizations that we both belong to, it's simply a matter of letting them know you're available. I get calls all the time from one particular academy that is, I need this, we need a reader this night, we need somebody that night. And if I'm not available, then I'm referring people out if I know they're available. And, it's again, once people know you do this, you'll be doing it. The thing is getting over the self-doubt. And at the very least, in my opinion, is having a landing page, even if it's a one-page landing page that people can go to. You can go to James. James, do your website again.
themanwhocanreadminds.com.
Yeah, and by the way, I do not have a landing page for readings. What I have is, if you go to thinkingmagically.com and go to books and products, that's how people are finding me. They're seeing stuff from that. I actually don't make a big deal about doing readings. What people do is they find me from seeing that I'm teaching others how to read it. So, at this point, is there? We can take one more question, and then we're going to call it an afternoon. And Enrico, I sent you a message. Go ahead, James.
I just have one comment very quickly.
Yeah.
For readings, I don't even mention readings on that website. Okay, that is my website for my mentalism and for my hypnosis shows and stuff. But I have the domain Psychic James Scott. Pretty simple, right? Makes sense, right? But I don't have a website there yet. But I had to have one for the Renaissance Festival, right? So, but all I did was I have an existing Facebook page. And so I just did a web domain. It's very easy to do, a web domain redirect to that Facebook page. So when people go there, they go to my Facebook page, right? And I just want to mention that. And the other thing is that not a big fan of this. I'm not a huge fan of this, but it's a great place for if you're going to do psychic readings. I'm not a big fan for getting gigs for myself for what I do. But it's called The Bash. It was formerly called Gig Masters, but it's called The Bash. It costs, I don't know if they have it in other countries, but here in the US, I know people that get gigs on there for psychics constantly. And again, if you price yourself at about $150 to $175 an hour, or $125 to $175 an hour, you can get gigs on that all day long. I just don't want to work that hard, but that's just me. But the point is that's about $400 a year, I think, but there's constantly gigs on there, constantly. So,
all right.
I don't, but there you go.
I'm sorry, James. With that, I want to thank everybody for joining in today. James, I love you for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Obviously, folks, it's a ton of info. We've barely scratched the surface of what's available. I wanted you to understand that there are people in the Proper Tarot group that have the experience. If you have the questions, that can help you make this more promotable and help you do what you want to do, even if it's just a hobby or it's just a reading for yourself. And so I go back to BC's question, how do you get started in this? You do it. You do it once you have faith in your readings, and I happen to have seen what you can do, and you're good at what you do. Fly, be free. James, thank you again. I appreciate you doing this. We will chat more. And with that, thank you everybody for being here. Be well, be happy, be safe. Peace. Bye-bye.